Now to fresh revelations of what fueled the deadly rampage of the Nashville school shooter, who killed 6, including 3 children aged just 9, at a Christian school in March 2023. So much of her manifesto was deliberately excluded from the official report released last week, but Megyn Kelly got her hands on the FBI report and the full manifesto.
The report from the Nashville police barely touched on the full scope and breadth of what was contained. The killer's struggles with her gender, her obsession with gender identity, alarming racial animus toward herself as a white person, and how those factors contributed to the act that she committed that day. Why do you think they excluded all of this? Why are those two things too hot to touch? What the Nashville police represented was that her trans ideology, her gender confusion, had absolutely nothing to do with the horrific act she took. Why? How do you glean that? This stuff is all over her writings.
Not only was this mass killer, who was born Audrey but calling herself Adrian, obsessed with radical gender ideology, she also had a deep hatred of America and of white people.
The killer writes about how epic it would have been if she had shot up her own high school. Quote, kill all the white kids, kill my own race. F yes, destroy all the white people who are teachers. Let all the black kids go, unless if I don't like you. The killer goes on, quote, being white sucks, but being black is so cool. Black people should rule, white people should fall. Every white person who lived and died, I hate you all.
Joining me now is comedian and host of Primetime with Alex Stein on Blaze TV. Alex Stein, this is deeply disturbing, but it paints a very vivid picture indeed of what motivated this mass killer. And for 2 years, authorities have deliberately suppressed those key details.
Well, Rita, they have to suppress those key details because when you look at this situation, like multiple other situations that are similar, it's not a gun problem, it's a mental health problem. And when you see that there's multiple transgender shooters that are, on mentally, they're all diagnosed as mentally ill and they're all on some sort of antidepressant or antipsychotic drug. So there seems to be a pattern when it comes to this. And they try to, keep that narrative from actually, reaching the mainstream, even though conservatives have been screaming about this constantly. So this only reinforces people like libs of TikTok and people like myself and people that have actually spoke out about the, pattern recognition when it comes to these shootings.
Now, Alex, I mentioned in Lefties that the stock market correction or crash, whatever you want to call it, is obviously enraging the usual suspects. It's certainly alarming segments of Trump's supporter base as well, including the few billionaires who support him. They've lost a lot of money. But the majority of his supporter base expected, indeed voted for major economic reform. They knew full well there'd be upheaval, there'd be winners and losers. The goal is to make American manufacturing and American workers the winners in the long run. Tell me how this policy is being received, not just by Americans in general, but particularly by Trump's base.
Well, you see people like Elon Musk who's speaking out against it. But of course, Elon Musk owns a multinational corporation, multiple multinational corporations. So it makes sense why he wants open trade. So, he has a vested interest in it. But when it comes to the fairness of the trade between America and all these other foreign countries, it's been unfair for a long time. And you said it best. I mean, when in reality, less than 1% of the population owns 99% of the wealth. When stuff like this happens, of course, people get affected. People have put in money in their portfolio and they see that go down. But I have no doubt in my mind that the stock market will recover because it usually always does and will bounce back. So it's just kind of a tough time in the short term, but in the long term, when all of these manufacturing jobs like Hyundai potentially building a $20 billion factory in the United States, it's going to create American jobs and it's going to make our economy stronger in the long run.
Well, the bottom 50% in America only hold 1% of shares. They're far less concerned by stock market fluctuations, no matter how dramatic they may be. And I found this discussion illuminating. This is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, speaking to Tucker Carlson about the two Americas, not left and right necessarily, but those who are financially comfortable and those who are struggling like never before.
I was really struck by two different statistics last year. Summer of 2024, Americans took more European vacations than they had in history. Summer of 2024, more Americans were using food banks than they ever have in history. I went into two food banks near my hometown to ask, what's the story? And they said, you know, for a lot of people, it's a loss of dignity to walk in a food bank. Of course, it wasn't their traditional clientele. It wasn't people who'd lost their homes. It wasn't people out on the street. These were working families.
Alex, working people having to go into food banks just to put food on the table. They just cannot afford to feed their families. That is just not something that is sustainable for a first world nation, to have people who are working full time who still can't afford the basics.
Yeah, here in America, I mean, it is, they say, the land of milk and honey, but for a lot of people, they're struggling, especially with our college system. You know, these kids get out of college and they're in so much debt, they have to do some sort of gig economy type job like, you know, Uber or Uber Eats, just to kind of make ends meet in between working a 9-to-5 entry-level job. So it sounds crazy that you have to work two jobs in America to make it, but you really do. And, you know, you're competing with illegal immigrants for some jobs. You're competing with artificial intelligence. So, you know, it's tough. And even if you do make a living, I'm going to be honest, I make a decent living, but still, you know, my dad's older, trying to save money for him. And it's just, even me making a decent amount of money, things are so expensive now. So I'm not surprised that more people are going to food banks. And really, I'm happy at least there are food banks in our country, that at least we can help some people out. We probably need to do more to help out the struggling Americans. And I think, you know, our country's headed in that direction.
Well, this is why so many people in the States and elsewhere really do not care too much about stock market fluctuations. That they're not, that's not what's keeping them up at night. What's keeping them up at night is how they're going to feed their families. Now, President Trump hosted the LA Dodgers today at the White House. He had the team cracking up after he refused to name a couple of senators that he doesn't like.
And others, we have a couple of senators here. I just don't particularly like them, so I won't introduce. Over the course of this amazing season, the members of this team I didn't think it was that big a deal, actually. Washington.
Never seen him so relaxed. He doesn't seem too bothered by the tariff meltdowns.
No, and isn't that just so funny to watch Donald Trump just be himself? You know, that was totally off the cuff. He just said, listen, I don't even want to recognize these senators. I don't like them. They don't like me. So I'm not going to give them my attention. And that's just him being himself. And that's what we didn't have with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was constantly, if he was off script, he was basically just drooling on himself, sadly. So, you know, I love to see a president pretty relaxed like that. And that was an own. And he wasn't even trying to own the senators that were there. So that was hilarious.
Yeah, he was surprised that there was such a big deal that he wasn't going to do that. He had the Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher, Clayton Kershaw, presenting him with his own 47 jersey. Let's have a look.
Mr. President, we have a gift for you as well.
Oh, I like that.
Now, he's quite a superstar, Clayton, and you've got a history with him, Alex. Do tell me what it is.
Well, Rita, Clayton Kershaw and I, we went to high school together at Highland Park High School in Dallas, Texas, where Clayton and I, in middle school, we were on the same Little League baseball team, and he is a future Hall of Famer. You see, that's me. I'm the really obese athlete right there, you can tell. And then also Matthew Stafford, who was a quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, who recently won a Super Bowl. So I used to think I was bad at baseball, but maybe it's because I was playing against two, you know, future Hall of Famers in different sports. So yes, I'd love to see Clayton give that jersey to Donald Trump. And Clayton, you know, he's a pretty politically moderate, but I know that all the liberals in California and Los Angeles especially are crying seeing him hand that jersey to Donald Trump. That was awesome to watch.
I can't believe you had two absolute superstars in that one little team. I mean, that is incredible. The little school in Texas, and you've got, well, 3 stars now from that little team. Now, before you go, Alex, Michelle Obama's podcast has been a big fail despite considerable hype and promotion. And I'm sure a very lucrative contract she's got there. She just isn't getting the numbers on YouTube or elsewhere. I can't imagine why.
I think a lot of young people, a lot of people in general, because of their narrow view of what's possible, they find themselves limiting what life could look like. And I always challenge young people now to first think about your why. You know, don't think about the what. Don't worry about numbers and titles.
Alex, she's supposed to be wildly popular, but this little chat we're having right now is going to have more views on YouTube by the morning than her podcast.
Rita, you're exactly right, and you're not being egotistical at all. This Lefty's Losing It clip will have millions, and I believe her last podcast had 38,000 views, and she has a marketing team that is, the same ones I think that work with the royal family. So the fact that they can't even get people to care about her podcast, and that's with her brother, it's just, it's really, it shows you that she's not as likable as the Democrats think. And what I really think, though, would make the podcast a hit is if she talked about her relationship with Barack, and she said that they were having problems. Could you imagine if it was almost like a divorce therapy podcast? Then you would watch that. Then I would watch. I think that's what she has to do. She has to have the public Hollywood divorce. And that sounds insane, but that's the only way to save that podcast, I feel like.
Yep, she's got to take one for the team and have a big revelation. Alex Stein, thanks for your time tonight.